The Bible teaches monotheism, one God. But recent archaeological digs across the Middle East keep unearthing the same shocking secret. The ancient Israelites worshipped a goddess. Her name was Asherah, and she was considered the wife of God. Why did the Bible erase her? Today we show you the physical evidence the scriptures couldn't burn and the true history of the forgotten goddess. It's one of the most recognized divine laws on earth. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. The second commandment, a rule so sacred that it defined millennia of theology, purified temples, and separated the chosen from the condemned. But what if that commandment wasn't just about idols? What if it was a cover-up, a purge designed to erase not a false god, but a rival truth? What if the image forbidden by Moses wasn't a golden calf, but a woman? In this video, we open the secret archives and uncover the hidden record of Israel's forgotten goddess, and ask the question that could rewrite biblical history. Was God ever married? For centuries, theologians, priests, and rabbis have told the same story. The second commandment was a wall against polytheism, a divine firewall protecting Israel from the seductive chaos of pagan gods. In Exodus 20 verse 4, the decree is unambiguous. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above or that is in the earth beneath. To the Sunday school student, the meaning is clear. Don't carve idols. Don't worship stone, bronze, or wood. God is invisible, transcendent, untainted by the physical forms worshipped by Egypt, Babylon, and QAnon. In the traditional Jewish reading, this was a revolutionary idea. Every nation around Israel had gods you could see, statues, idols, animal forms. But Israel's God, Yahu, demanded something terrifyingly abstract: faith in an unseen, formless being. Christian teaching built on that foundation. Church fathers declared that God had no wife, no equal, no image. When the early Christians faced accusations from the Romans for having no visible gods, it became a point of pride. The invisible God became a badge of divine superiority. For thousands of years, this reading stood unchallenged. The second commandment symbolized purity through absence, no image, no idol, no feminine partner. But history, like archaeology, has layers, and buried beneath the theological surface is a layer of ash and shattered idols. Because the earliest Israelites weren't born from monotheism. They evolved into it through conquest, revision, and the destruction of everything that didn't fit the emerging story. And when we dig into that historical context, the simplicity of that explanation falls apart. Imagine walking into the deserts of ancient QAnon around 900 BCE, before the great kingdoms, before the temple priests, before the final edits of the Torah. You'd find not one uniform religion but dozens. Shrines scattered across hilltops, carved wooden poles, Asherah standing like silent totems beside stone altars, and inscriptions invoking the same phrase again and again: Yahweh and his Asherah. It sounds impossible, like heresy in its rawest form, yet this exact phrase has been found etched into ancient pottery and temple walls at sites like Kuntalat Adrad in the Sinai and Khirbet Elkam in Judah. Archaeologists unearthed these inscriptions alongside paintings showing a male and female figure, a divine pair. To the modern eye, they're crude. To the ancient Israelite, they may have been sacred art depicting the union of Yahweh, the storm god of Israel, and Asherah, the mother goddess of fertility. Here's where it gets strange. In earlier centuries before the Babylonian exile, the boundaries between Yahweh, God of Israel, and the regional gods were blurry. Yahweh shared titles with El, the high god of Canaanite myth, and El had a consort. Her name? Asherah. Archaeological remains suggest that Yahweh didn't start as the only god, he started as one god among many. And as his cult grew dominant, the feminine divine was not merely forgotten, she was deliberately erased. The Bible itself bears the scars of this deletion. In 2 Kings 23, the reforming King Josiah is described tearing down the altars, smashing images, and bringing out the Asherah from the house of the Lord. That's right, the temple in Jerusalem itself once contained a statue or image of Asherah inside the house of Yahweh. Later writers turned this scene into a triumph of monotheism. But what if we're really reading a cover-up report, an account of state-sponsored iconoclasm? Biblical editors polished that destruction into faithfulness. But in doing so, they may have preserved accidental confessions, the kind that no amount of theological editing could scrub out. Consider the bronze serpent Nehushtan from Numbers 21. According to scripture, God himself commanded Moses to make it to heal the afflicted. Centuries later, King Hezekiah destroyed it for being an idol. a divine object created at God's own command, destroyed in God's own name. The contradictions only make sense if older religious objects, once sanctioned, became suddenly forbidden victims of a theological purge. Now, scroll forward to the exile period in Babylon. This was when the Hebrew scriptures were compiled and edited into the form we recognize today. Monotheism solidified in exile because its opposite, polytheism, was associated with defeat, idolatry, and national shame. It wasn't just theology anymore. It was politics, national identity, and memory control. Images of God, especially those suggesting he had a feminine partner, had to vanish. Fragments survived only as linguistic ghosts. Asherah transformed from a name into a thingapole, a symbol, a sin. By the time scribes finished their editing, Yahweh and his Asherah had been replaced with a single, jealous deity demanding absolute fidelity. But bits of evidence, archaeological, linguistic, textual, refuse to stay buried. And they lead us to one shocking question. If Asherah was real, if she was worshipped alongside Yahweh, what does that mean for everything we know about God's origin? The deeper you dig, the less monotheistic the Bible's earliest layers appear. The ancient Canaanite pantheon, documented in the 14th century BCE clay tablets of Ugarit, features an entire divine family. El, the father of gods, Asherah, his wife Bale, their storm-born son, and a celestial court of lesser deities. Now compare this to early Israelite belief. In the oldest biblical fragments, including Deuteronomy 32:8-9, some ancient versions read, "When the Most High, El Elyon, divided the nations, he fixed the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God." But in later editions, sons of God become sons of Israel. A deliberate edit, scholars say, to hide the original polytheistic worldview. Why change it? Because acknowledging sons of God implies a divine family, a pantheon. And if there are multiple divine beings, the second commandment isn't a ban on idolatry, it's an attempt to suppress divine competition. Now imagine Asherah, not as a cartoonish fertility idol, but as a full-fledged counterpart to Yahweh, a goddess of creation, life, and nurture. Texts from Ugarit describe Asherah as the lady who walks upon the sea, the mother of the gods, and the tree of life. Sound familiar? In Proverbs 3:18 AM, wisdom Chakma in Hebrew is described as a tree of life to those who embrace her. Later Jewish mysticism personified wisdom as feminine divine energy, the Shekinah God's indwelling presence, exiled with Israel. It's as if the goddess's spirit was never truly erased, just reshaped into abstract metaphors. The archaeologist William Dever, digging through 8th century artifacts in Israel, found thousands of female figurine, small clay goddesses with exaggerated breasts, buried in domestic shrines. The official religion might have been monotheistic, but the people themselves, the households of ancient Judah, were quietly still praying to her. When Asherah was banned from the temple, she retreated into homes. The temple priests declared she was an abomination. The mothers of Israel whispered her name at childbirth. Officially, she was gone. Privately, she endured. The paradox gets sharper when you realize how uncomfortable the biblical writers seemed about feminine divinity. In Jeremiah 44, the prophet rails against women who bake cakes for the Queen of Heaven. Why? Because they defied his message of Yahweh alone worship. But those same women tell him something remarkable. When we worshiped the Queen of Heaven, we had plenty. Since we stopped, we've suffered famine. From their perspective, Yahweh was the problem. Asherah, or the Queen of Heaven, provided abundance. The split wasn't theological, it was existential. And now, imagine the editors of the Bible compiling these memories. They couldn't delete everything, but they could rewrite context, turn the goddess into a sin, the sin into a warning, the warning into doctrine. That's how the traces survive camouflaged within condemnation. Consider the word Asherah itself. In some verses, it's capitalized, referring to a deity. In others, it's rendered generically as a pole. This shift happens within the same books, suggesting multiple authors across timelines, some who remembered her and some who couldn't afford to. Even the imagery of the tree of life may have originated from Asherah's sacred symbol, a stylized tree flanked by lions, representing nourishment and divine order. The same tree that eventually appears in the Garden of Eden. Could the tree of life guarded by angels have been the sanitized echo of the goddess erased from creation itself? And here lies the central paradox. If Yahweh once had a wife, and if her image was the image forbidden by the second commandment, then that law was never just theological. It was marital. It was political. It was an act of divine divorce. The feminine image was expelled, forbidden, labeled as corruption. But in doing so, the early shapers of monotheism erased half the divine story. The remnants live on in whisper, in metaphor, in mystery. The Shekinah of Jewish mysticism, Mary, the Virgin Mother of Christianity, Sophia, the divine wisdom of the Gnostics, all distant echoes of a once recognized truth. God was not always alone. So, was Asherah truly Yahweh's wife? Historian Margaret Barker calls her the lost lady of the temple. William Dever goes further, writing, "The worship of a goddess beside Yahweh was not deviation, it was mainstream until suppressed." The secret archive reveals that the birth of monotheism wasn't the dawn of divine truth, it was a coup. The victors rewrote heaven's genealogy, deleting the goddess from God's family tree. And the second commandment, it may not have been a warning against idolatry. It was the first cover story in biblical history. So, what have we uncovered in this video? The commandment that shaped monotheism may have been written not to protect the divine, but to bury it. Archaeological inscriptions Yahweh and his Asherah. Temple records of purges and reforms. Mythic memory preserved in forbidden fragments and feminine metaphors. The forgotten wife of God was deleted from scripture, turned into silence. But her fingerprints remain in wisdom, in mysticism, in the mythic roots of every Abrahamic faith. It changes everything we thought we knew about how God became one. Because before there was the Lord, our God, the Lord is one, there may have been two. At Secret Archives, we ask questions the canon won't touch and dig where faith fears to look. Our mission is simple, to expose the truths that the archives kept hidden. Now we turn the question to you. Was the commandment against idols really about piety or politics? Was it an act of faith or a deliberate erasure of the divine feminine? Let us know what you believe in the comments below. And if you're ready to keep uncovering the forbidden histories of the sacred, subscribe, like, and open the next file from the secret archives. Because the story of the forgotten goddess is just the beginning.